Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we are specifically going to talk about the man that created D&D partnered content and made it what it is today, which is the future of Dungeons and Dragons. All right, and that man's name is Sean Merwin. All right, so let's get into this. So, who is Sean Merwin? Sean Merwin is an American game designer, and he is integral in D&D design, and he is a D&D canon hardback author. Now, what did he write? He wrote Acquisitions Incorporated, one of the strangest D&D canon hardbacks ever, and arguably the first partnered content in all of Dungeons and Dragons, right? So let's define our terms here. So first of all, what do I mean by D&D partnered content? Well, if you're not aware, the most exciting thing happening in Dungeons and Dragons right now is D&D partnered content on D&D Beyond. And so basically, if you go into D&D Beyond and you click View All Sources, you will see every single D&D canon hardback, right? And on the bottom, you will see partnered content, right? Now, first of all partner content is actual full D&D canon. How do we know that? Well, sitting right down there is Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, right? That is a full-on D&D canon hardback, red ampersand on the side, 2014 era. It's done. That's full canon, okay? And that means that everything with it there, in my humble opinion, is full canon, right? So now, partnered content on D&D Beyond is a huge deal for many reasons. Why? Why is it a big deal that D&D has this partnered content? That's a good question. Let's get into it. So first of all, what we really see when we look at D&D partner content is that the entire OSR and the entire indie game sphere is not actually a real industry. It's literally a farm league for Dungeons & Dragons. And so these guys scrap it out. They make the best games they can. And then Dungeons & Dragons comes over and says, I anoint you, and makes them official Dungeons & Dragons. And like a good example of where this happened was Dungeons of Drakkenheim. You know, the D&D dudes, sitting there doing their, content, and they're like, hey, we've been running an actual play for a while, and, let's turn it into a product. And then Dungeons & Dragons is like, you guys have worked hard. You've built a name for yourself. Your world is respectable. We're going to make it official D&D. And that's what it is. It sits in the D&D partnered content. And that is a pattern, right? Like Dungeons & Dragons can say, hey, I know you got your cute little OSR game there. I know you got your cute little indie game there. We might anoint you and make you official D&D. And then it'll be just like, Avatar Last Airbender going on Netflix, right? A few people watched it beforehand. The whole world watched it then, right? And Dungeons & Drakkenheim was just a scrub little project sitting somewhere on the internet. But now it's literally D&D canon, right? And their last, I think their last Kickstarter hit like 1 million, right? Like it's a pretty big deal, right? And so this partner content is a very big deal. The other thing that it does is not only is it a farm league, but it's also a king of the hill, kick you down the hill pattern, right? So, so everybody got upset in January 2023 with the OGL crisis, the manic panic, as I like to call it, right? And what was really interesting was you saw this minute where you're like, okay, I see where all this is going. People are upset. And just like a bunch of other people, Matthew Colville got his fur in a ruffle. It was like, I'm going to make a tabletop role-playing game. It's going to call the MCDM RPG. And people were like, oh, is that real, man? Matthew Colville, people listen to him. He might be a real competitor for Dungeons & Dragons. And that idea existed for about a year, right? Until he's like, psych, everybody, I was just kidding. My book, Flee Mortals, is sitting over there. It's official D&D canon. And I am subordinated. I am subjugated by Dungeons & Dragons. And he was just literally consumed whole by Dungeons & Dragons. He had his little sword. He had his little shield. The dragon ate him, right? His content sits there on Dungeons & Dragons. So it's hard to say, yeah, I'm a real competitor for Dungeons & Dragons when your own content is sitting there in their stable, right? And so it's a really big deal. So partner content is huge, right? But get this. The guy who created partner content, this is the only place you're going to hear this, is Sean Merwin. It's the Grim Hollow setting is on Dungeons and Dragons canon, and it was on there very, very early. It was one of the few settings that came on there right after Explorer's Guide to Mountain God, Explorer's Guide to Mount, Explorer's Guide to Mount Wind. I'm forgetting the name. Exandria, you know the one I'm talking about. There's 2 books: Call of Exandria, Call to the Nether Deeps, Wildmount, excuse me, Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, right? So you got the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, and all of that is there, right? And so it's important and it's significant, right? And get this, if you look at Grim Hollow, it is the template, right? Sean Merwin knew what it took to be knew what it took to match a D&D canon hardback, because he wrote a D&D canon hardback, right? Acquisitions Incorporated. He set the template, and Grim Hollow has been copied by every single book on there, right? If you look at the art ratios, if you look at the template layouts, I think Dungeon Dudes copied Sean Merwin to the nth T, right? I think that the Dungeons of Drakkenheim. I also think that Humblewood, right? If you look at it, it's got Sean Merwin's fingerprints all over it. It is exactly the same pattern. So my point is that Sean Merwin built the template that everyone copies to get their content onto Dungeons & Dragons as a partnered content, as official D&D canon. And he set the ratios he set the standard, the quality standard. He set the quality standard for what it takes as a third-party producer. And he works for Ghostfire Games. So again, he was the bridge between, this is official content canon, I've written a literal D&D canon hardback, and this is exactly how you take that same level of quality and put it into a third-party product. So I want to be the only person on the internet to say Sean Merwin is 100% responsible for establishing the importance and establishing the farm league that is D&D partnered content. In my humble opinion, every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.